My name is Kristinn Thórisson. I'm a professor here at Reykjavik University, and I am the director of the Icelandic Institute for Intelligent Machines. My main job is to research the phenomenon of general intelligence, and in a way that is intended to be suitable to be implemented in computers. And I also do a lot of applied AI, and at the present time we don't have any real AGI, of general intelligence, in machines. So the applied work involves a lot of application of current knowledge, current theories, and current technologies in various forms for various purposes. So in engineering, when you want to build a bridge or skyscraper or something, you start with listing the requirements. You know, it's got to withstand winds of certain strength, and it's got to carry certain weights and so on. And so this is not a very traditional way to go about basic research. But we have found that for intelligence, because it's a very complex phenomenon that there's still no accepted theories for, it's a very good way to make progress on the hard questions of general intelligence. And so we have essentially distilled certain properties, features of general intelligence that my team and I are working on and have been working on for the past 15, 20 years. And this includes, for instance, cumulative learning. You've got the system has to be situated. So because being an agent in the physical world, or any world for that matter that is not fully known, requires you to acquire knowledge on the fly, on the go. And we want systems that can do that at all time, at any time. Just like animals, including humans. And so cumulative learning and cumulative reasoning. This is one of the things that somewhat separates the human species from other species, but and we like to think that we're a little bit better at it, or certainly we do have some abilities of reasoning that other species don't seem to possess. One of the telling differences is that we have a much more sophisticated communication system, given what we call natural language, than other species. Although other species have been able to pick up some of that. Especially the syntax is very difficult for other species to learn. It is fairly complicated, and for them to learn. So. So these are some requirements. So reasoning, cumulative learning, situatedness. We have to assume that the regularities in the world are due to causal relations, and causal relations may be hypothetical. It may be that there are actually no causal relations in the universe, and it's all statistics, but certain things are more reliable than others for getting things done, and that's what we call, that's a practical view on causation. So if I push this button and the light comes on, I know it came on because I pushed the button, because I know how the mechanism behind that system works. And if it doesn't come on, I can also say that it's broken, because I know how that system works. And so I know there's a cause-effect relation, and I do model that, and we do this, and every human does this, and animals too, for a huge number of things. And this is how we are able to generalize. So if you break down reasoning, for instance, there is prediction, there's abduction, which is the inference of cause. There is generalization, or induction, and then there's analogy. And these are extremely important features for general intelligence. You have to have them all, and they have to be systematic, because a general intelligence is essentially modeling a rule-based system. And when it's not rule-based, we call it noise. And we try to break down, and engineers try to break down the noise to find some signal in the noise. But sometimes this is not possible, and then sometimes you have to go deeper or you have to zoom out using microscopes or telescopes or whatever it is. And this has been the history of science for centuries. To me, the most convincing attempts at creating AGI systems are holistic approaches. That is, the approaches that attempt to have a complete list of requirements from the very beginning, and or at least attempt to have it. Because you can't really ever be sure until you actually have achieved it. But the attempt is worth its weight in gold. And so these approaches essentially include these requirements that I already mentioned, and put them together in a system that works as a whole, that is implementable as a software system. And that's actually we of course don't know if what natural brains do is implementable as a software system. We don't know that yet for sure, but it's very likely, or at least we could get very, very close. And so that is a test, in fact, of the quality of the ideas, how far they are from being able to be implemented as software. So it helps to have a good definition, and we would call it working definition of intelligence. There is danger in premature definitions of any strange or ill-understood phenomenon. So you've got to be careful with that. But we are following a definition that Pei Wang created in the mid-90s, I believe, and did a really good paper on in 2020. Which defines general intelligence as the ability to handle novelty and to deal with the unexpected and figure stuff out. And my version of that is discretionarily controlled adaptation under insufficient knowledge and resources. So. Because no one knows what the future holds, we can never be sure that we know what's going to happen or whether what we plan to do is going to work out, ever. That's like a permanent state. So essentially the future is always unknown, has some unknown elements. And this definition defines intelligence as the ability to handle that scenario, that state. This definition essentially allows you to create new kinds of tests that involve novelty, in fact. But it's not novelty as in no one's ever seen that before, but novelty to the system. And I believe this is a more fruitful way than any other that's ever been suggested. In fact, it is inherent in some of these ideas of prior, like, for instance, Wozniak's coffee test, that a robot might be called to have general intelligence if it can go into any kitchen in any house on the street that you live, or in a city, and make coffee, because no kitchen is exactly the same. Although this does not get around the problem that this would be a coffee-making robot, and you wouldn't actually say that it has general intelligence if all it can do is make coffee in any kitchen in the city. So it doesn't quite get it, but it's sort of pointing in the right direction. Yeah, so that's where you get to a very important question of transparency. If the systems we build continue to be like LLMs and other artificial neural network approaches, I don't think we'll ever get to well, actually, it won't be good science, and we will never get to safe systems. The trick to safety, as far as it can be done, because the future is unknown, and you would like these systems to be able to handle unknown situations. The only way to get to some sort of safety is by the transparency of their mechanisms. And that means also their implementation and their actual state at any point in time. So when you ask, for instance, a friend of yours about what their intention is and whether they think they can drive this car, and your friend, you have some experience with this person, so you can trust them when they say when they give you the answer, and you can put your own judgment on what they're saying and what they're planning to do, right? This is the kind of transparency I think we can actually achieve with AGI systems, with the added possibility of pressing pause and opening the hood and looking inside. Now that can only be done if it's an ocean of a billion zeros and ones. There's no hope, because the semantics, the meaning of the state of the system is completely hidden. Not only is it hidden to us, it's hidden to the system itself. So you can't even engineer in any mechanism for the system to ensure its own safety. These systems, a future of robots driven by LLMs is actually a horror story in the making, because you can't ever trust these systems. You can't ever open the hood and be sure of anything, and you can't ask them to explain themselves. So we must drive towards, and in fact that's how science works. It works by explaining things. And we want to explain general intelligence. We don't want just to be able to make a black box that does really cool stuff and nobody knows why. That's not science. And that might be practical only for very, very limited things, like movie recommendations, where no one's going to die. But most of the things that we want done in the world by machines that aren't being done in the world require some sort of a judgment on the actions that are taken due to the unpredictability of the future. So transparency is really the key here. So one of the things with respect to safety that is very important, and with respect to transparency, is that the goals of the system that we build can be inspected. And an AGI system, of course, or a semi-AGI system, must be able to create its own goals and sub-goals. It must be able to check its goals and verify them and run them past someone if it's unsure about whether they're a good idea or not. And they must be concrete in the sense that a goal should be describable in some way by some milestones. Like, if I want to get beer from the fridge, I'm going to go over there, and then I'm going to reach out with my arm and open the door, and then I'm going to scan, et cetera, et cetera. Well, these are physical things. There's also, of course, cognitive things. The system has to also be able to inspect its own state, mental state, to some extent, and to be able to reflect on that and learn about that, just as it learns about anything else. And this requires the generation and management of goals that are transparent, not just to the system itself, but also to us. So it can transfer any part of its mental state that's relevant at any point in time into language or into some other form, and communicate that to anyone, anywhere. Of course, it's electronic, so it's an AI, it's a robot, so it can send it, somewhere, etc. And this will allow us to make very, very different systems that are way more safe. And I should add, as a footnote, and this cannot be done without knowledge of cause-effect relations. The only way to really unify these things is to think of them all up front. This is not talked about so much, but in computer science and AI, but every engineer knows that if you want to retrofit some major functionality into an existing system, it can hardly ever be done, certainly not properly. If you design an airplane that actually flies, and now, you know, afterwards you have the thought, wouldn't it be cool if it could also dive? You know? And yeah, but how are you going to retrofit that into the current design of an airplane that's built on certain principles and certain requirements, right? It is impossible. And one of the things that's impossible to retrofit is, for instance, into AI systems is the ability to handle time. If you don't design a system, if you design a timeless system that has no concept of time and no special management of time, you look around you, you know, the time flies, especially if you're having fun. So you're not going to be able to add it later. And LLMs, of course, being the, you know, AI du jour, are completely timeless. Yes, there will be a lot of naysayers here, but they will all be wrong. It's too long to go into. It is actually still a discussion in the theoretical realm. But on the point of unifying these things in a single system, it's all about architecture. And just like if you rip out the carburetor or you know, the gas tank or whatever from an internal combustion engine, it's just not going to run. And you can talk and talk and talk about how it would be cool if it did have, you know, the spark plugs in, or if it did have some gas, etc. But no one's going to be convinced until you actually get one together and, you know, you start it up and you drive. So it's very much like that. You know, the mind is a system of parts that all need to work together in a certain way to achieve a result. And it's a very it's the most complex machine probably that science has tried to build. All AGI claims I view skeptically. And the reason is that, well, certainly most of the people who are, let's face it, only a fraction of the people talking about AGI are actually working on AGI or have some experience in AGI. So everyone else who's talking about AGI just doesn't know what they're saying, just doesn't know, doesn't understand the subject. And yet they might think they understand the subject, and they might know a lot about other things, but they would have to prove to me that, or, you know, convince me that those things are relevant to AGI. Because I've spent most of my professional career actually trying to figure out what matters and what doesn't matter in AGI. Now, I didn't used to have the G in there because I didn't think it was necessary, because to me AI was about general intelligence. But apparently I was in the minority there. The majority of people were just pursuing whatever was cool. So most claims about AGI are really ill-founded or unfounded. And my favorite one is AGI is going to happen next year, or just, you know, or in 5 years. These are very common numbers you get also within a decade. Those are all baloney, I'm afraid. Because, and the reason I know that is because I have looked at the requirements for how to achieve what general intelligence achieves. You know, even a short list of the things that almost everyone agrees would be part of what a general intelligence can do. Not the long list, like, oh, our hopes and dreams of what an AGI of the future might be. It requires such an intricate set of highly sophisticated mechanisms, that some of which are very close to philosophy still. And so that requires research, that requires lab work, that requires experimentation and comparisons and so on. That's just not going to happen in a decade. It isn't. I think all of those claims are based on a linear extrapolation of the feeling that people in tech have about the last 3 years. Very bad basis to go from. So this is a tough question. We really don't have, and when I say we, I mean science doesn't really have a good theory of tasks. And we don't have any way of saying that one task that's reasonably different from another task is somehow equivalent when it comes to intelligence. So there is no way to say doing that task, learning that task from scratch is equivalent to learning this task from scratch. There is no mechanism to compare tasks. I'm not even saying there's no theories or good theories about intelligence or general intelligence. I'm saying there is no theory of tasks, which seems like a ridiculous state of know-how. And what my team has been doing, sort of on the side, because our main thing is AGI, is to look at that question. And it has actually helped us quite a bit and informed us in how we think about AGI. So with respect to generality, I'd like to replace it with a novelty, because that seems to be easier. If you have a system that's never seen X, and you present it with an X or a small x, that is much more promising as a way to assess whether there's some generality there or not. How well can the system generalize from one case to another, from one knowledge set to another? In fact, you can actually boil it down to the question, how does the system make new knowledge? And if it is anything like humans, we think that it involves coming up with ideas and trying them out. But before you try them out in the physical world, there's thinking. And when you think about those things and how you came about the new ideas and how you evaluated them in your head before trying them out, if you use that, even if you're completely wrong and it never works, if you use that experience to learn how to do that, now you have a system that can actually learn to learn. And I believe that is one of the requirements of general intelligence. You have to be able to reflect on your own knowledge, consciously or subconsciously. Don't think too much about how it happens in your head, because we're just talking about mechanisms here. After all, this is going to have to be written as software, right? To essentially improve your own ability to deal with novelty. Okay, I'm gonna go with a nice surprise. Actually, there have been several, but the one big nice surprise happened about 15 years ago when we formulated this, my team and I, this approach that I just outlined, and the initial outcome of applying that approach, that methodology, to creating a system. We had come up with a very lofty demonstration that we thought we would never achieve. And this demonstration involved a system that could learn to do a TV interview and learn the language being used without having been given anything, any knowledge, except 2 pages of very sparse code. So really learning a novel task from scratch on its own. And we thought, if we can get halfway through this, that would be awesome. We're on the right track, right? Well, it turned out that the task we gave this system when we had built it was too simple. It learned to do a 5-minute interview on recycling of 6 different materials by watching humans, and it wasn't 2 million hours or 200,000 hours or 2,000 hours. It was 20 hours. On a supercomputer? No. On a laptop from 2012. So that was, that I don't think I'll ever see another nice surprise like that in my career. In fact, that was just wildly out of the ballpark. So openera.org, ERA spelled A-E-R-A, autonomous reflective autonomous empirical reasoning system. right now it's having this effect that a lot of people like to dream about the near and far future. There's much more dreaming now, especially, you know, both in social media, but also, you know, in the media in general. People allow themselves to imagine all sorts of future scenarios, machines that don't exist now, and they invariably think they are not far away, you know, not many years away, under a decade. The trend seems to be that people are in the sort of contemporary AI tradition, which is the applied AI. By far the biggest attention is on applied AI, but academic research on AI still needs to happen and is still ongoing. And of course is the source of what we have now. The applied AI now took essentially 60 years. This is something that never gets reported. You know, most of the demos we see are like, okay, this was 2 years in the making. No, it was actually, and very clearly 60 years ago that, you know, it was, I believe it was in 52 that, or 53 that the first artificial neural networks paper was published. So people have been working on this, but it's not counted because it didn't enter industry until 10 years ago. And so there's a misconception there. So all of the fundamental ideas still have to be created by basic research, and the sooner that the general sort of, let's say, industry, those researchers in industry who are working on contemporary AI and applied AI, the sooner they realize the limitations of that technology, that it can't be linearly extrapolated, you know, forever into the future, and it's not just about scale. The sooner the work that we do in AGI is going to have an impact, because they're going to go then and look, what have people done? Because that takes a lot of work, and it's easy to dismiss that. It's part, as Edison said, it's part inspiration, part perspiration. But it's a cycle, and it's not just 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration, as he said, or as the famous quote goes, but rather a cycle where you have periods of just hard work and paper writing and so on, and then you have an epiphany, or a small epiphany, or a series of small ones over a period of 1 or 2 years, and then you lift it to the next level. And that's how basic research goes. But that's the only way to produce fundamental new ideas and technologies. When they enter industry it's a very different question. You know, it has to be accessible enough. There has to be sufficient documentation. It has to be runnable on the machines that are available, and so on. So there's a lot of parameters there that have nothing to do with the state of the knowledge per se. These are two separate things that, or mechanisms, in fact, that play together. And until about 10 years ago, industry completely ignored AI as more or less a joke. AI is highly dependent on engineering, clearly. The field has essentially decided that part of its mission, at least 50%, is to make machines that can do stuff that no machine could do before. And specifically machines that think or do something along those lines. It's not to copy humans. It's to do things that require thinking or something along those lines. And so, but for the most part, AI has maxed that principle out and paid less attention, to its own detriment, I believe, to the scientific pursuit, which is not engineering, The scientific pursuit has to do with identifying what knowledge is missing and filling that gap. And part of that knowledge is how to put together a whole system that can actually be more autonomous, be more reliable, be more trustworthy, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the science part. So I'm not going to tell people which side to pick, but the progress of AI cannot possibly depend only on one or the other of these two. So just be careful that the field isn't so lopsided that it hampers progress. If you really believe that all you need to do is scale up LLMs to get AGI, then this is going to be over very soon. But we already see the evidence. It's accumulating now for the past 2 years. There's a plateau, and they're not going to scale any further. And there's a fundamental reason for that. I could have told them that 10 years ago, 5 years ago, if they had listened. But investors keep pouring money into that on broken promises, basically. And so you have to have informed decision-making in how you spend the money if you want to really make progress, if you really want safety. If you don't care about safety, then if you work for someone who has that mindset, go find another job. That would be my second message. Please don't add to the confusion and breakdown of society due to AI. Don't let that be our legacy. Let it be the legacy of understanding general intelligence and having so good theories that we can actually make safe systems. Oh, yeah, so I'm always looking for collaborations. I am especially interested in getting collaborations on people that share the assumption that you need to have a lot of ingredients to make some progress. Yes, it sometimes sounds daunting. It's like, why can't we just cut this out and that out? And people open the Occam's razor and they start cutting away, and then suddenly, thought you were studying the tree, but now it has no leaves, and it's not really a tree anymore. It's some abomination of a butchered natural phenomenon. The best example we have of general intelligence is human intelligence. So let's not slice it so thin that every slice looks like something very, very different. We have to have at least like a minimum of the required ingredients to start working. And there are all sides to that, to the questions that come from that. So now, let's say you have these ingredients. You take the broad view, not the deep view. If you have to pick. And so take the broad view. Think about how they work together, and now you can bring in a background from cognitive science, from computer science, from neuroscience, from mathematics. And any one of these backgrounds working together with the right questions has a great chance of advancing our understanding of general intelligence. So that, it's a fairly general call for collaboration.